Hello, welcome to Lackluster Reactions. I'm your Lackluster Reactor, here today for our final review of Dark Gathering. Season 1 review, hopefully. As much as a horror fan as I am, I definitely need more of this show. So it's not surprised that I like this show, but the why is always the most important. So, with timestamps in the description as always, let's ghost! The central part of makes the show as good as it is are the haunts. The various spirits we dealt with were all memorable in their own way, from our first foray at the phone booth to the haunting in the abandoned tunnel. So before we get to the main characters, let's quickly run through my top 5 spirits. So some ground rules first. Our 3 S-rank friends are excluded. Yes, they make quite a show, but their main narrative purpose ties them to our graduates, so we will cover them separately. Same with the graduates. Third, we will also have spots for our 3 main villains, so the god, as much as he deserves first on this list, is excluded to his own section. And finally, I am judging based not only on the haunts itself, but what story importance the haunts had, and the general instances around the haunts. Fifth and bottom of the list, we have the suicide video from episode 4. Of the rank and file ghosts, this one stands out for me for the fact that it is the ghost to give the first real challenge to our main characters. Sure, there was a corrupted goddess, but this was a cursed video who tried to emulate all who tried to watch it, and kept trying to light the flames when people tried to exorcise it. It took having Keitarou sit naked in a car, and them driving at a certain speed to keep his arm from catching fire to defeat it. Maybe forgettable when compared to some of the heavy hitters, but this still cracks the top 5 today. Number 4, we have the brainstem hunter from I's apartment building. We were already dealing with a lot, this being when we first were introduced to the god. However, this man was a menace who hunted them on the way out of the building. It also served to show our first real instance of a ghost forcing other ghosts to do its dirty work. But also, his fate has to be one of the greatest instances of Yayoi's cruelty to date. Not that the guy did not deserve it, but still. Third place goes the ghost which, outside of some of our S-ranks, stands as the most successful haunt to date. The tunnel ghost. Its initial haunt was nothing special, but with how it was able to fake being captured and had Keitarou at its mercy, it deserves this spot. Could have ended him right there if Yayoi did not figure out the trick. But there are 2 who just shine a little more than it. Second is Mr. Sakashita, hide and go streak ghost. This one had the benefits of being between the S-ranks captured and the appearance of the graduates, so it had one of the more overall fleshed out backstories. Seeing the poor teacher bullied by his students, then framed for pedophilia, then committing ritual suicide so he could get back at those who did him wrong. I'm honestly surprised he did not end up as an S-rank. But in the end, it was our little organization of the possessed who brought out his fighting spirit and set him up the whole haunting, which not only was atmospheric and persistent, but also would have succeeded to defeat Yayoi if she was a second slower. Applause to you, good man. And first place goes to nobody's surprise, the House of Immaculate Conception. Chills. For both episodes, chills. Looking at how messed up everything is, and I mean looking because I still am not sure how to describe the incest murder house without potentially triggering YouTube censors. But the raw levels of every taboo being broken by these 2 who are walking a path straight towards hell, and deals with the little hellspawn that was created, made the place equal in levels of a graduate's backstory. It will be haunting, which I will not forget anytime soon. Next, we look at our graduates. Technically, we have 7 now, according to Yayoi. This is with the count of the 3 S ranks we have captured/befriended, and the alien spirit. Which, first of all, brings up the question of both the 4th graduate Yayoi started with, and the combination of diesel spirits apparently still around Yayoi, but maybe she has a reason not to use them and is therefore leaving them out. Plus, the alien evolved last minute when they were already planning on leaving, so she might have just decided last minute to keep the other 2 in the backseat for now. So let's cover what we have and do it in pairs. After all, each of our graduates was first used to take down one of the S ranks, so may as well judge them side by side. So let's look at one, the other, and maybe even the general haunt. First, the corrupted priest and the castle ghost. The castle ghost was a good introduction to how difficult S ranks can be, not only separating Keitarou and Yayoi, but putting them in a place where they almost lost their heads. It was empowered by the arm, but we still saw it in a more recent fight that the ghost holds its own to the courtesan. It is definitely a spirit of equal rank. We then go to the priest, the weakest of our graduates, but no less dangerous. His only combat ability is the sutras which drag spirits to hell, but how hard it was to stop it from chanting at all was what really made it a threat. If we are being realistic, first real time our main characters were almost killed. All in all, a good first introduction to graduates. As for the first fight, it was decent. Though that being said, it was an introduction to both S-rank ghosts and graduates, so it was in all honesty, basic. Neither of them were bad, but they served more as being an example of being they were more an example than being amazing in their own right. Maybe they will get more of them in the future too, which will interest me, but for now, they are nothing too exciting. Our second round, we start with the Old Tunnel Ghost, who is another example of a bully ghost who forces other victims to bring in new meat. We do not only have him to worry about, but we have a small army, this being one of the highest body counts we have seen so far. We see the young girl looking to record the ghost who lured in Eiko. We have the vast amount that was living in the sealed area behind the tunnel, all of them who were horrifically skinned and were killed while looking up at their own faces. The tunnel ghost is officially the ghost who is the most horrific, which we do not have a backstory for. Unless you, of course, you count the god. What makes it the worst is the pure sadism that goes into the hunt. Other ghosts we have lash out and attack, but those which collect, like the old tunnel ghost and the brainstem taker before, do not seem to have any motivation for their actions besides being examples of the worst humanity has to offer. When you get to the point of forcing other victims to help you, you have gone past the point of feeding to survive, and gone to complete monster territory. And the Old Tunnel Ghost is the greatest example of that we have seen thus far. On the other side, the Martyr. Some events are guaranteed to be hell, to cost a soul even if they survive to see the other side. War is one of them. The Martyr may have survived the war, but he did so exhausted, dehydrated, and with thousands upon thousands of deaths upon his hands, all of which entrap him in this world, unable to move on with the weight of lives upon his back. And so he was when Yayoi found him trapped at his own grave. The Martyr's fighting style was magnificent, because all he wants is to die, to move on, but he is fated to survive anything, from his own weapons to being eaten. And each layer forcing upon anyone in the radius the same horrors of war he and his men felt, getting worse and worse, and he draws weapon after weapon to reflect the battle of a frontline soldier, drawing their knife when they run out of bullets, then a grenade to take down as many people as they can when he himself dies. And do not think I forgot the eye with the flag of Japan, forcing him to dance on puppet strings. So good. Especially if you research how messed up the Japanese military was during that era. Personally, this is my favorite of our S-ranked versus graduate fights, showing fully the extent of what we can expect from both sides. I mean, did you see what a second in the barrier did to Keitarou? He was out for episodes. The clearest example of the overwhelming force Ghost can take, approaching the level of the mysterious god. Then we come to the last of the big battles we were given this season, the battle between the Dam Ghost and the Oiran. I'll have to double check how to actually pronounce it later, but the courtesan. Two perfectly matched competitors with their own fearsome backstories. Starting with the boy, looking at what he had to deal with from his stepmother, and not only himself being turned into meatballs, but also eating his father unknowingly before that point. Again, no question about how he ended up as an S-rank ghost. But his hunting also brought him head and shoulders over more of the lesser ghosts we dealt with this season. His power to both turn others into meatballs and regenerate from consuming them is already fearsome enough. Add in the location, a dam full of spirits of the dead which, in an emergency, he can eat to regenerate himself. You get a battle which is not going to end easily. And then he goes super mode, and can create and consume in the same action any other opponent, and he would have been unstoppable. But unfortunately, his opponent was a courtesan, whose powers counted the boys, maybe a little too well. I know there is some that needs to be waved away as just being fiction, but how would Yayoi learn about the disease being part of the course, and how often is that part of a power set used for a practical purpose? But the other two halves, the taking of life force to heal herself and the rapid burning of said life force to spread fire across a large area, is an interesting feast and famine method of attack that goes well to set her apart from the other two, and sets up her own mental instability. Then we have a backstory, which does a speed run of a person's life falling apart, both the chance of marriage and getting out of the red light district, and her looks disappearing in the blink of an eye, on top of the taunting from the junior, who was only respectful to get ahead, ready to sabotage at every turn. We have had some scary murders before, but it is always the victim who turns into the evilest of spirits. Though I guess our Oiran might be both, considering she burned down what was likely the whole entertainment district, if not only that single building. A single blaze of glory which would become the crux of a combat technique. Lay on one more layer that she is an actual threat, even when she is being used by Yayoi. The Martyr did not directly attack others, the ghost soldiers roaming around it, and Keitarou was caught up in its attack. But both times the courtesan took the opportunity to strike, trying to seduce and drain Keitarou in the Love Hotel, and turning against them and needing to be recaptured after the battle against the damn ghost was over. While I think the Martyr is stronger, the Oiran is more dangerous because it is not on our protagonist's side, and will do what it can to free itself from Yayoi's thumb if given a chance. Overall, I like the fight less, but slightly. The Oiran's power seems too perfect for countering the situation presented, but both ghosts involved are definitely top-notch. I cannot wait to see them again in the near future. And finally, standing alone without an S-rank beside him, we have the alien. The last survivor of the purge triggered by the god's appearance. He was a companion beside the group when they had little other options, and is slowly gaining in strength, moving towards returning to what he once was. Which raises a question of what he is. We do not get confirmation, but we do have what I have been told is an anime-only scene of the girls visiting the grave of Taira no Masakado. And yes, I do have the name written right here. I am bad at names, even when it's a monster I know well. And is Masakado well known? He was a rebel, leading uprisings, eventually reaching the point he declared himself the new emperor. Of course, the then emperor had a few things to say about that, but actually being able to pin him down took bounty hunters working to fight him for weeks. Eventually he was killed and his head brought to the capital, where it was placed on display. However, the head did not rot. Instead, for 3 months had its eyes follow people who passed by, and howled at night for his body. Eventually it just flew off, eventually finding its way to a small fishing village where it was actually given a proper and respectful burial. For a while, all that would happen around that area was that would one day be Edo, would be storms and lightning strikes. Then, the new Meiji government moved his tomb to build a new Ministry of Finance. The same building which was leveled to the ground during the 1923 Tokyo Yokohama earthquake, one of Japan's deadliest earthquakes. Then again, they tried to build, and all 13 people involved in that were killed mysteriously. Then, 9 surrounding office buildings were struck by lightning in a single year. Then World War II happened, and America tried to build on the land where the tomb was, but heavy equipment kept overturning. Needless to say, everyone was convinced the place was indeed cursed. And let's not even get started on the legend of people putting him in a work of fiction without asking his express permission at the shrine first. So, what does this mean in the long run? Well, I do not have to say that having one of the 3 greatest curses is kind of a big deal. Yes, as we have established, he is currently degraded, but after this last big feast, he is considered on the same level as graduates and S-ranks, while still not being at his full power. Of all the spirits, our alien doll friend is at the position of being that at the endgame. One who will be there to put up a fight against the god, the organization, whatever cursed Keitarou and Eiko, and the Shadow of Death. It has already become the most used spirit, and I can see it continuing on until the end of the series, going stronger and stronger until returning to its former glory, around one of the fights at the end of the series. As much as like I and want her to be around more, it is Masakado who is currently in the running for the 4th member of the main cast. But we also have dealings with some lasting enemies. The long goals we are dealing with throughout the seasons. So let's highlight the mysteries. First, we have the least personal stakes, but the one who might have the longest lasting impact. Maybe. We have the mysterious organization of possessed people without a cool acronym. We heard about the organization shortly after we learned about possession, with us having some who have had the power to see spirits slipping up and allowing their bodies to be stolen. We also find out that they have their hands in many pies, being the ones responsible for the 2 mummified arms, the suicide falls going out of control, the creation of the House of Immaculate Conception, and most importantly, the creation of the Specture of Death. It makes it clear they are the men and women behind the worst happenings of the show. And yet, And this might just be because they have not done anything yet, but they are not threatening at all. So on the one hand, we have the headhunting ghost, which is another mark on my top favorite ghost scenes. They did an excellent job at just seeing how strong it was and how much fear it can cause when it goes full tilt. But then we have the doll, which, yeah, I get it, possessed doll, swap places with a human, but it's still an empty-headed piece of plastic. She not only tipped off Yayoi of the existence of the organization, but both gave her general information as well as believing in her being possessed just because she said so. We do not see the editors in the organization that much, and what we do see is that they have some caution and planning abilities among them. But as a whole, they are going to need to do more to impress me. But as for speculation of what the plan is, we've had a few key pieces of information. First, we have the mummified body, which the hands came from. No clear end goal with them at the moment. But second, we have both the House of Immaculate Conception and the Specture of Death. Two fetal ghosts which seem to be focused on a single goal, being born. Which fits with the fact that they are ghosts possessing the living. Would certainly help if they found more permanent solutions, wouldn't it? I don't know how the mummified arm is fitting quite yet, but I believe we can look forward to seeing what inhuman things they try to do to give themselves living bodies. Emphasis on looking forward because at this point, they're just not doing it for me. Hopefully they ramp up in the future, but where we stand, they are just forgettable threats. So next on the list, we have the closest to a main antagonist of the entire series, the Shadow of Death. The other ghost fetus made by the possessed. This is the ghost who killed Yayoi's parents and kickstarted her march towards revenge. The only other ghost who could compare would be whatever cursed Keitarou and Eiko, but we're still drawing a blank on those two. Of all antagonists, the Shadow of Death is the one which we have the least of motivation to. All we have seen it do is float around and consume. It took away Yayoi's mother for the purpose of it being a fetus, and just designed to be born. All in all, a simple adversary. However, we have seen it in action, and it shows itself doing something we have yet to see from the other enemies. It can grow and evolve. To listen to Yayoi, we likely have enough gadgets to put up a fight against it. However, when given tips from the god, it quickly capitalized and beat the corrupted deity using her weakness to children. And in absorbing said deity, its powers increase like we have seen with some graduates. And I do not even want to go into what it having the split pupil might mean, besides giving me a reason to call it and Yayoi's siblings. True looking at it, the Shadow of Death has the same hanging in the background but lack of direct threat as the organization responded. However, it has already shown well enough to prove it will likely be our last boss. Pretty good for not even being born yet. And finally, to end off the list of ghosts with the most pertinent threat at the end of the current season, the Unnamed God. He is the most powerful, at least for now, of the 3 greater scope enemies, and he is the one they are running to Kyoto with a plan to stop. A monster, it will likely take more than 7 graduates and S ranks to bring to his knees, if that itself will be enough. The Unnamed God is a threat we have seen appear a few times, and each time it has made itself clear as one of the scariest things we have seen to date. First, it has been protecting Ai all her life by pushing all her misfortune onto those around her. Then we have it walk into Yayoi's room and kill many of the spirits within, causing the chain reaction which forced a graduate to be born. It easily defeated the Shadow of Death, but leaves it to live because he wants to fight strong opponents. And finally, we have Ai's Dream, where we see a preview of the making of a new bride. Of the three threats in the coming future, I believe the god clearly stands at the top. However, it is also the ghost with a clear time limit, Ai's next birthday, which they need to beat it by. Which, having the largest threat we have slated to go out first, is kind of sad, but outside of Possessed, it is the one which is the least personal for our main cast, only directly personal through Ai. Which is sad because I do not think I can say much about him besides him being ridiculously strong, ridiculously scary, and incredibly straightforward of an adversary. Hopefully Kyoto throws a few curveballs, but even without them, seeing the fight is going to be satisfying. Now that we talked about the various ghosts, let's top everything off with a look at the humans, our main three. I wish it was main four, but I is currently more of a plot device than an actual participant in ghost hunts, so. First off, our main character, Keitarou. Main character because this is a Yayoi show, but we need an everyman to be the protagonist instead of the most interesting characters. Almost like a harem anime. Not that his connections are not themselves interesting. He and to a lesser extent Eiko's cursed arms are an important part of both their characters. His having isolated him and left him with Eiko as his only remaining friend until Yayoi joined the equation. He has suffered the supernatural all his life and just wants to do what he can to force his life to remain normal until Yayoi enters into his life. He then finds himself dragged into his own personal hell by the two closest people in his life, putting everything on the line for a little to no reward except the ability to return home safely afterwards. It does not help that the two people close to him are horror fanatics, intent to drag him to his almost death repeatedly. But what makes him someone who can stand beside them is that he cares about them and is willing to put his life at risk for them. Eiko, his best friend, who quickly becomes his girlfriend even if it is not mentioned as much, and Yayoi, his first student and a sister figure, regardless of how much she creeped him out at first. He sticks with them no matter how insane the ghost of the week turns out, even when he does not need to. He was given so many chances to run away. Not only did he not need to return after the first ghost, but he, at separate points, saved Yayoi and Eiko when they were in trouble, even though running to their rescue put him in danger time and time again. But the most recent one is the best illustration. Ai is in danger, but Yayoi gives the other two an easy out. Keitarou does not even consider to not go, calling Ai and letting her know that they are coming to visit. And more than that, developing his own innovation to the plan, which impresses the two masters of the technical aspects of the hunt. Keitarou is the bland everyman, but he is the one who will always charge in and help the others when there is danger, even when it seems like he is not cut out for it, or getting in over his head. I like our girls better, but the man deserves respect for what he does and has done for the other two. Now, this is Yayoi's show, but the character I think I fell in love with the most is Eiko. Because, horror fanatic, but obvious bias take, but I enjoyed her, even though most ghost hunts have her as the third wheel. In early episodes, we are just given the outside introduction of a character as a childhood friend / love interest of Keitarou. She's the elder cousin / adopted sister of Yayoi, the one whose job it is to drive them to ghost hunts. She said one unsettling thing about liking being scared at one time. It was Keitarou and Yayoi who were main center of the show, and I am not going to lie and say that that is not most of the case. However, a few things about Eiko. First, she's not just a driver, but She's also the top of their class, including their old class in college, some already knowing about her, which is brought up plenty of times. From the use of cameras she developed herself to track and save Keitarou when he is in over his head, or the development of the immortal paper doll, which I hope we get to see more of her as a tech person while they are in Kyoto and not just be stuck as a driver or placed in danger. I know it's supernatural, but having some technical expertise can be helpful no matter the situation. But she's also yandere, which I and me love, love, love. But a good example of a non-one-dimensional one, like the ones we far too often get. She's obsessed with him, gets cameras and trackers on him whenever she can, and ropes him into the whole ghost hunting business. But she also has her own character arc outside of him, which we'll get to in a moment. And let's not forget, she becomes the main character's actual girlfriend. How many yanderes besides Gasai can you say successfully did that? And she managed to do it without tipping him off about being a yandere, and so they can have a normal relationship. See the things you can accomplish when stabbing is not your response to everything. But it's not just her love for Keitarou which drives her, but her love for fear. Which brings about the best character arc in the show. And maybe the only real character arc. It's horror, we're not here for growth. But either way, we have the girl who is obsessed with being scared. She was not a direct participant in many of the early scares, just being the one responsible for driving them to the location of the ghosts. Most ghosts possess Keitarou, and the one which she did get possessed by, the Suicide Bridge Shadows, she was out the whole time. So during it all, she was just living life. Then they faced the S-rank at the old tunnel, and she was the one on the chopping block. She was the pretty face the butcher was after. She was the one who found a stranger the same age as her, who was a former victim luring her into a trap. She was the one that Yayoi just barely managed to save, and it rattled her, as you might expect. So, what did she do? She goes to the shrine dedicated to one of the 3 greatest haunts in Japan, for the sole test of if she could do it, where she could go to one of the scariest places for ghost hunters, and be okay. And she loved it. Even after everything which had just happened to her in the previous arc, she could still turn to Yayoi and say she was in love with being scared. Which I have to say, I am a horror fanatic through and through. This is 100% relatable. Sure, I do not hunt ghosts, but as years go by, people change. And there are times something happens that changes your view on the subject. Or maybe nothing changes but the years of time. And when something comes along and proves to you that you still love a book you read, one of your favorite genres, or a hobby that might have started to go stagnant, it's a good feeling. Eiko stands, in my opinion, above the other 2 of our main cast, because she is a horror fanatic who was first to face horror in real life. The old tunnel ghost. The House of Immaculate Conception. But through it all, she was able to reflect on it and say what all our viewers did. I love being scared. And we finally come to our final character, our main character, Yayoi. The ghost hunter, the one who has crafted the most devilishly twisted murder room in order to avenge her parents' death and mother's abduction. She is the one whose arc is the main motivation of the story, and undoubtedly, she is the scariest creature we have seen thus far. Let's just look a minute to gush about everything our little murder child has done. She has found ways to effectively battle ghosts, mastered her skills over an approximate 5-year career, and despite her size, she is a damage per second type character. She has made herself and her friends impervious to damage as long as they have enough paper dolls. She has turned her room into a mortar room, keeping a balance between the spirits until something throws off the balance, which results in the creation of graduates. She found effective ways to store graduates, not only improved when a group gets their hands on a lot of ghost hair, and has come up with ways to kill a god, and has apparently done so in the past. That said, in turn, she is not the most emotional of characters in the roster. Her parents were killed in front of her when she was 4, and she has focused on nothing besides capturing ghosts all the time since. Not to mention her intelligence high, another factor in keeping people lonely. Some might mistake her as an overall flat character. However, we see how she opens up to Eiko, Keitarou, and I, relating to them and opening up in her own way throughout the series. Sure, this might not be the best series to watch if you are looking for emotional moments, but that does not mean there are none. Just that Yayoi is not going to be the one to show it on her face. I can see why some people might characterize Yayoi as unfeeling, or maybe as Mary Sue, but an honest look shows she does have plenty of connections to those around her, though stunted. I wish I could argue harder against the Mary Sue, though. She is a 9-year-old who can kill a god. And there is only so much I can say about her that is not how impressive her knowledge and her fighting skills are. But at the end of the day, this is a horror anime, where the main character needs to be strong enough to survive. Can someone who is not as broken as Yayoi have made it this far? And that brings us to the end. Overall, a 10 out of 10 series for me. Waiting for season 2, waiting for many more seasons to come, hopefully. But that's something we're going to have to wait for, apparently. No news for the coming year. But I guess that's going to be everything for me. So, thank you for stopping by and listening to me talk about ghost hunting for about 30 minutes. I hope to see you all again whenever this show comes back, or on another show, but for now, it's time for me to ghost! Yes, I did need to do that twice.